Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. I'm Robin, and I have the privilege of introducing all of you to a good friend of mine. We don't get to spend a lot of time together, Kim, but just the time we have spent together has been so special.
Definitely.
And I feel so honored that you have come to spend some time here and share a little bit of your story. And the reason I wanted Kim to come and share her story is because I know that, Kim, your story is going to encourage and give hope to some people today who just need to know how faithful God has been in your life and how you've overcome some seemingly insurmountable circumstances. And I don't want to embarrass you, but I just have to say, Kim, you really are one of my personal heroes. You really are.
Thank you.
Because of how you've chosen strength and you've chosen to believe what God has said. And you are now a single mom of 6 amazing kids. And that's part of the story of why we're here today. You and your children came and spent some time with us this summer, and we played together and ate together. And Kim and I had some unusual time to talk alone together on the deck when the kids were hanging out, and we ended up in a conversation just rehearsing things that you'd been through, Kim. And I remember looking at you saying, you know what, we have to share the story. Others need to hear that story. And so that's where the idea for today's interview came from. So let me just begin with introducing the fact that Kim and I met probably, 5 or 6 years ago when you and your then husband and your children attended our community, Beth Tikkun Messianic Fellowship. And we always sort of clicked. We just always found our way together to chat in a group because I think we recognized in one another that we loved to talk about the real things. Yeah. We never waste a minute, do we, with talking about things that don't matter. We just jump right into the deep end, and we always did. So when you started to suspect that there were some things that you were going to have to deal with, I remember you saying, Robin, something's not right. And then as things started to unfold in your life, which we'll share the details of here in a moment, I was able to at least a little bit come alongside and walk with some of this through you.
A lot.
So that's how we got to this moment today. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, finally, Kim, so that you can just tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your life. And let's start back with maybe your first marriage. Okay? Because it must feel weird to you for people to find out that you're not only a single mom, but you've had 2 marriages, and you have to deal with people making assumptions. And it's tough, isn't it, as a woman, to just deal with people's assumptions and realize they just have to maybe not really know.
Yeah.
So here's an opportunity to really share the true story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yes.
Thank goodness. Okay. So when I was 21, I got married. His name was Jason. He was a preschool teacher. He helped in his youth group. He fed the homeless on the weekends. He was seeking to live biblically. He had cleaned up his life, and he's
a good guy.
He was a good guy.
Yeah.
He had a friend at that time who introduced us to a Torah lifestyle. So we began that journey early in our marriage as well.
When you say Torah lifestyle,
the feasts, eating clean.
Just going back and realizing that all of the Bible is relevant and has something for us to learn from.
Right.
And you started to kind of walk in that.
I had grown up doing Passover, but he said, hey, there's all these other feasts, and people are doing Saturday Sabbath and
let's
eating
this
way.
out.
And
yeah.
So that was part of our life then. 2009, I was pregnant with my first child, and it was not a good time economically, so my husband had a little bit of a hard time getting a job, so he joined the National Guard, and he went in to be a chaplain's assistant. So he wanted to serve, he wanted to do ministry in that way. He was controlling and abusive before boot camp, but after he went to boot camp, he just came back a completely different person.
When you say, Kim, that he was controlling and abusive, was it off and on to where you could sort of tell yourself the story that it was okay.
Yeah, it was nowhere near as bad as it was going to become. So
So he was kind of leading a double life.
he was, he was starting to head down the right path and probably just wasn't ready for marriage necessarily at that point. But both of us were lonely and young,
demons.
and
Sure.
had a past, and so so then when I had married him, he had sold his guns. He never cussed. When after boot camp, he came back, and he would always have a weapon on him. He would drink and get drunk. So
there was a scary intensity all of a sudden to
Yeah.
him.
So when he would get really angry, he'd pull out his gun and point it at himself or point it at me, and I just got used to diffusing those kinds of situations and just didn't know. For a long time, he wanted to even leave, and I just held on. I was just
Why?
more afraid of that stigma of divorce.
Okay.
Of being divorced,
And
single mom.
You were determined. I'm married. I'm going to stay married.
I didn't want anyone to know, and he definitely didn't want anyone to know. So it was intense. It was
You
scary.
must have felt lonely.
Yes. Even in my marriages.
You couldn't tell anybody.
Right.
So this went on for a while, Kim, and then it sort of came to a head.
2017, I was pregnant with my 5th child, and it was on a Wednesday. He admitted to me he was really depressed, and he said if he didn't drink, he felt really low, but if he drank, he felt just a little bit better. He could get through his day. So then that was on a Wednesday, and that Sunday he ended up taking his life. And
Were you home?
I was home. We got into an argument. I thought he was just going to drive away, but then he didn't come back into the house, and I found him. I was the one that found him, and I was 5 months pregnant at the time and about 30 years old. So
Were your children home?
Yeah, they were all home. I told everybody right away, and so it was such a dynamic of,
Now what?
But like the grief and the suicide is already just a
devastation.
terrible thing to have to unravel. But then,
death of a spouse is bad enough.
Yeah. So I had loved him. I had hoped and prayed for years that he would turn. And the reason why we had so many kids is we had so many good times, and I hoped that things were getting better, and we go through cycles where life was good and then it wasn't good.
Did you have any idea that he was feeling that desperate?
Well, again, like all those years since boot camp, so for about 8 years, when life got really hard, it was, he would pull out his gun and I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to kill myself. And of course he didn't want me to go to anybody for help, and he never went to anybody for help. So I knew he was that desperate, but in that moment, it wasn't like a writing a note kind of moment. It was bizarre. It was just just totally shocking,
unreal.
Yeah.
So, a personal question. You don't even have to answer this, but did you struggle with feeling guilty?
Oh yeah, he wanted me to feel guilty. Like days before, he told me he wanted to kill himself, so I would feel guilty for the rest of my life for that.
Oh, Kim.
Yeah, I mean, I would think I should have done this. I think anybody with suicide that close to home has to struggle with a level of that guilt.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember you sharing with me that things started to then spiral down for you because you had this torment.
Yeah.
And you had the responsibility for these children. And at one point, you were trying to find someone else to maybe take your kids and raise them because you didn't even feel like you could do it.
That was later on. So just to catch up to that point.
Sure.
So I had my baby that summer, and I kind of held on. That kind of helped me, I think, in a lot of ways, just hang on. And then that fall, I just really started to just get into a pit of darkness and loneliness. Just thought nobody's ever going to want to marry me with all of these kids and little kids. They're little. Like my oldest was 7 with special needs at that time. So,
and you probably had challenge with just finances, making ends meet.
We still live with my parents.
Okay.
So that was okay. I made my life harder on myself, thinking I needed to like build a stay-at-home business and do all this extra stuff while I'm got all these kids to take care of. So some of that I realized later, I didn't need to worry about. Yeah, everything really was okay. Finance-wise was okay.
Most of our stress is pretty self-imposed.
Yes, that's what I'm realizing.
I know.
Probably why we're here right now talking about this.
Right.
But yeah, so then in that desperation, that loneliness, that fear of the future, then I met a man, and I didn't know him. I just quickly, we only knew each other less than a month, and I just not in the right frame of mind, and I ran away and married him, and that's how we ended up meeting, though, too. So many blessings in this downward spiral I was going on. That I can see the Lord's hand still on me and all of this. So that's part of my story, too. But came out here, moved my children out to Ohio, and then I just tanked all the more. I didn't even want to leave my room. I realized that I had gotten married really fast, and
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've got to make this work.
I got to make it work.
Right.
But, like the depression, anxiety, and so then that led into a time of feeling like I'm the worst mother in the world. Like, what am I doing? And then, I was asking people, can you take my kids? Like, I really felt like I really could understand, though, why a mom would leave her kids.
Absolutely, for their
she
sake.
She honestly feels like you can find somebody else better.
I know. My heart goes out to women, Kim, who adopt even their babies when they feel like they can't do it. Mm-hmm. And I never condemn a woman for making that decision, because I know that so often she's in a place where she's trying to do the best for her child.
Right. Yeah, I see that now.
I know.
Definitely. I can have a heart for that.
Do I recall that at some point you were even hospitalized along the way?
That was in Indiana. I didn't know where else to go. I knew that and I think a lot of moms can relate in the postpartum time, like when your thoughts are just kind of wonky and like
in the best of circumstances.
Even just normal life, it can just be a really scary place to be.
Overwhelming. Just tried to numb the pain a little while.
I don't know. I just looking for help, but it's hard to know
for you for a while.
Well, I don't know. That was a whole other scary place to be. But then thankfully, part of my story then goes on to I met Dr. Monzo, a naturopath in Medina, and that was a turning point for me. He really got me the physical help that I needed, and just in a matter of months, I was on my way again. I was able to function, make friends, make a whole life for us here in Ohio, and I always will look at that as a time of, even when I was just a mess, God was looking out for us, and I have no doubt that He had His hand on me, so that what I realized in that time of those darkest times that I was in, it's a pit of self-pity a lot of times.
Oh man, we all struggle with that. And you
got to climb out of it. Yeah.
But even in your circumstances where an onlooker would say, well, yeah, she has every right to feel sorry for herself, it's still such a self-defeating
It is.
pit.
There's no life in it. Yeah.
There's no life in it. So we were chatting the other night with some friends, and the whole subject of like mental illness and emotional instability came up, because so many people, Kim, are struggling these days. And
so many.
To be honest, even in my life, I remember moments, and I shared it with you when we were on the deck. I said, I remember a moment in my life when I felt so sad and so overwhelmed. And I had these voices in my head telling me that there was just nothing to look forward to, or no reason to try anymore, with just some circumstances that I was facing. And I remember thinking, I feel like I could just so easily let go and allow myself to just fall into kind of a pillow of numbing myself with some pills or whatever the doctors would recommend. And I know that there are times that we might need medical doctors to say, listen, let me just get you through the hard bits.
Right.
Kind of like pain medicine when you need it physically. But if you stay on pain medicine after you break your leg for 10 years, you're going to have problems.
Right.
So I think there are times that we need a little help, perhaps chemically, to help us get through a sad time. But Kim, as you know, it's a trap for so many people, because they don't know how to get back to themselves again.
Yeah. It's a good
Do you know
way
what
to say
I
it.
mean?
Yes.
So I suspect that could have been a huge way for you to consider just escaping. Yeah. But I'm glad you didn't. And Dr. Monzo helped you find the road back to, as you described, healthy lifestyle, the way you think, the way you pray, the way you eat, the way you move, the way you breathe. And you built back a healthy Kim. And here you are. But it didn't happen overnight.
No, and two, I've realized it's like a lot of wrestling of, do I really trust God is good?
Trust.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is the thing that we all have to really continue to struggle with. Do I choose to trust what he says is true, or do I doubt it?
I trust that he's good.
Trust that he's good, even when life is hard. Even when life is painful.
Yeah, and then we become the people we don't want to be. I thought, how could you let me do that? How could you let me go down that road? How could you let my husband kill himself? How could you let all these things?
And those are legitimate, honest questions.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of the worry and the depression and anxiety just comes because we gotta dig that up and wrestle with what's going on in our hearts of deep questions.
I don't think that a lot of people know that there's a choice. Like, I think that so many of us for a while are told that we are at the mercy of our thoughts.
Yeah.
But the word tells us that we can take our thoughts captive.
Yeah.
And I think that is a powerful tool once we realize, you take your thoughts captive and realize, am I believing a lie? And if I am, it's going to hurt me. Right. But if I choose to see what God says is true and then trust that it is true, there's hope.
Right.
Don't you think that there's a huge connection between trust and hope?
Definitely.
So pick up where we left off and continue to share your story.
Feeling good then after that. 2019, I had another baby. And then at Beth Tikkun, I picked up a little blue prayer book. That was my first time with a Siddur. And it just took my prayers from, because I had been a Christian since I was a child, and it took my prayers from just minutes and praying a list of needs to just, it was words to what was on my heart. And
I too appreciate that template. It doesn't seem antiquated. Some of those ancient prayers have, just like you, given me a way to express what I didn't even know I needed to say.
Right. Yeah. And then brings you into God's presence. And then, so that I really, over that next year, developed a really deep and real prayer life.
Okay.
So I can't help but feel like that led in to preparing my 9-year-old daughter, who
this is when things started to get really difficult.
Yeah. So
and you had no idea what you were about to face.
Right.
And this is when you and I were getting acquainted, really getting acquainted.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So then she told me that her stepdad was sexually assaulting her, and we called the authorities, got divorced after that, moved back in with my parents.
Well, you say all that in one sentence, but it didn't all happen in one sentence. But
about in just like a week, it felt like a lot.
But that's when you started to become a hero, Kim, because I watched you get that news and know that your daughter had confided the truth to you, and you confirmed it in other ways. And then you had some choices to make. And I know that there are other moms out there who realize that if they're honest, they have some choices to make. And it must be tempting to say, you know what, let's just gloss over this and figure out a way through it without anybody knowing. But you were like, oh no, no. I'm going to protect my children. And within 24 hours, this woman had her house packed up and her children transported to another state to protect them. I was in awe, and I just thought, what a brave person.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy. We had a lot of, our community came around us too for support, which
and there was embarrassment and shame and legal stuff and kids who were grieving and your daughter feeling guilty, like she turned your life upside down.
Right.
Yeah, but you did it. You went forward, one step at a time. You did, and I watched. And I remember at one point, Kim, in your story, and I think that maybe this is another thing that sort of prepared you for this whole amazingly challenging trial, is you discovered Sabbath. And I remember you saying, Robin, I think Sabbath saved my life at a certain point, just knowing how to rest. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing that in preparing for this question, I was realizing, like, in my deepest, darkest depression was when Sabbath was such a brighter light. Have you ever felt that? Like,
Yeah.
Because the day-to-day
contrast.
is so it wears on you, and you don't feel like it's so hard to find joy. But for me, Shabbat was always a point of joy, that it never was hard to find joy in preparing for it and
a day of
resting in it. Yes, a day where everything stops and you get to really live how God meant for us to live, not striving all the time. And
So how did you learn to do that with 6 children and a household that wasn't headed up by a stable marriage?
well, so we had started Sabbath before kids, and so back then
It's
at
a
the
journey, isn't it?
yeah, at the beginning it's kind of, what do we do all day?
Yeah, this is like how many hours till I can
I
like
know.
do life again? I
Isn't
know.
that just tells like where our brain space was, because now it's like, why wouldn't I enjoy a day where we can fellowship, talk about stuff like this, and talk about the Word and just connect? The day goes, it flies now,
Yeah. And you don't want to let it go.
right, you don't want to let it go, but then you get to be recharged for the next few days, and then my kids learn the days of the week by counting to Sabbath. It will be like Sunday or Monday, and they'll say, Mom, when's Sabbath? Oh, let's count through the days.
That's a sign when you know that your family is discovering the delight of
Yeah.
Sabbath, when your children look forward to it. That's really great. That's really great.
And they know what's important. They know family time is important. They know it's important. We stop, just like God himself stopped and took a whole day to rest, and then blessed this day and set it apart. And it's a day we can reflect on his blessings. And he invites us. It's an invitation.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss that.
I don't want to miss it either. It's so funny. I felt compelled to share a little gift with a lady recently. It just came in my mind, put something in an envelope and hand it to her. And I was so excited to share this gift with her. And the place that we were supposed to meet, she didn't show up. And I had this feeling of, oh, I'm missing and she's missing this opportunity for me to give her this thing that I think she's in a position to appreciate receiving, not because of me, but because of him.
Yeah.
And I heard the Lord speak, this is how I feel when you miss the gift
The gifts,
that
yes.
I want to give you, and you're too busy to stop or too distracted to care. And he's like, but I had something so special.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with His Heart, or My Heart, Christ's Home?
Yes.
That's something I just come across. But it's that idea that there's this moment in this story where, okay, I guess I should
Just tell us.
explain it. So the author of the book, he tells about this experience with God where it's like inviting God into our house, and we show him around the house, and he says, oh, what's this room? Oh, that's my sitting room, and there's a fireplace there, and the Lord says, oh, let's sit here, let's come and be here together, and set a time, and we'll be there every day. And so the author, he does that, and he keeps meeting with the Lord, and it's wonderful. But then life happens, and he gets away from it, and then he comes back. One day he comes back to that time, and the Lord is just there, and he says, you don't understand. This time means something to me too. That's what Yeshua says to us. Like, we don't see that.
Like, I'm giving you something that when you receive it, it gives back to me because we connect, right?
Yeah, and we think it's we should, maybe we think we need to read our Bible and because we're supposed to, but
Like it's an obligation.
yeah, but it's our
not a
delight,
religious
it's our
thing,
life,
right.
it's a place where he wants to meet with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel sad when I overhear conversations, and I guess I can relate. To be honest, I was here myself at some point. But when I hear moms especially kind of regard Sabbath as another thing they have to do, and it wears them out to even think about another thing they have to do.
Yeah.
My heart feels sad.
Yeah.
Because it is a way for them to be recharged and to delight. And I don't know how to, it's something I think he has to put in our hearts, don't you?
Yeah.
So, Kim, you've mentioned just the Sabbath and the gift of prayer and being in his word. What are some other ways that you learned to just cope with the uncopable? I mean, what are some things that you've learned to do to succeed as a woman, as a child of the Most High, as a mom, as a friend? It's a lot of roles to play.
So in my part of my journey in coming to Ohio, being at Beth Tikkun, I remember one of my friends said, "Hey, are you joining Robin's Valor class?" And she's gonna. And that was before the book, so I didn't. I thought, okay, yeah, whatever you're teaching, I want to be there. But then that was like winter, spring time of 2020, right before
COVID. It all
right before
started
COVID,
to unravel.
And then it was in that July that my daughter told me, and so. It's powerful. We could sit here and just read the whole book.
I didn't know you were going to say this when I asked you this question, but the text is powerful, Kim.
Yeah.
Because
you draw out the treasures for us.
He stretches forth his hand and fulfills the desire and the need of every living being. And if we receive what he stretches out his hand to give us, then we have something in our hand to give to the needy people around us, including our own little ones.
Right.
And I know you and I kept talking along the way. You kept saying, "Oh, Robin, I think I'm starting to understand that if there's something I need, he's going to give it to me. And if he doesn't give it to me, then I don't need it."
Yeah, he's called something. He has a different path,
and that gives you peace, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a different life than what I'm learning to slow down, and Sabbath taught me to slow down my week, but Valor taught me how to just slow down, and really every day be in the Word and in His presence, and it takes work, but
we have to labor to rest because it goes against our natural grain to do it. But when Messiah says to come to me, all you who are weary, and I'll give you rest, and be yoked together with me, it started to occur to me back in those years that if I'm feeling really weighed down and miserable, I'm carrying something I'm not meant to carry.
Yeah.
Right? I read a story just this morning. It's so cool we're talking about this because it described Sabbath as there being a beautiful, wonderful king who is not only a great king, but he's a great father, like our king and father. And he had a son that he loved, and he had a beautiful palace, and he knew that eventually his son would need to leave the beautiful, safe palace and go out into the world and experience some difficult things. But he established a day every week for the son to return to the palace so that he could remember where he came from, how loved he was, how loved he is, and be equipped to go back out and do what he needed to do. And that's what our Father and King desires for us to do every Sabbath. So it has been your lifeline. Yeah, that's so encouraging. It's so encouraging because that's something that he's made available to everyone, to all of us. So I know there's been some special books along the way as well. You've got one sitting here by George MacDonald. And you shared with me that there's a passage that just kind of encapsulates the things that you've learned about the heart of the King. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes. Okay. It's written at a different time, so bear with me. The name is one which no man knoweth, saving he that receives it. Not only then has each man his individual relation to God, but each man has his peculiar relation to God. He is to God a peculiar being, made after his own fashion and that of no one else. Hence, he can worship God as no man else can worship him. For each, God has a different response, With every man he has a secret, the secret of a new name. In every man there is a loneliness, an inner chamber of peculiar life into which God only can enter. I say not, it is the innermost chamber. There is a chamber also, O God, humble and accept my speech, a chamber in God himself, into which none can enter but the one, the individual, the peculiar man, out of which chamber that man has to bring revelation and strength for his brethren. This is that for which he was made, to reveal the secret things of the Father.
And this is from
George MacDonald.
365 readings. Oh, I love that. Tell me why you love that.
I love that because I grew up Christian, grew up in the church, but and people saw me as doing a good job in
You presented well.
Yes, I presented well. but I never had this like deep. There was like a roadblock as far as getting closer to God. So when you described in Valor, like the doors that like, okay, I've gone through certain doors, but that life is a whole journey of continuing to get closer and closer, and Hashem's just going to keep on bringing us closer and closer. And
it's funny you say door, because that's what C.S. Lewis presents in the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
And don't you think of that magic wardrobe? When you enter into God's presence now, it's like leaving the ordinary and entering into this real world. It's more real.
It's more real.
But people back here who've never gone through the wardrobe, they don't believe you. They don't get it. They think, well, why would I do that?
Yeah.
I'm too busy out here. I'm here. That's not
Or they
real.
think, I have prayed, I have read my Bible, but they just aren't, they may be frustrated with that. And maybe that's where I was.
Yeah.
But with Valor, it just gave me hope. It didn't feel like, oh, here's a list of unrealistic expectations that I can't make.
None of us
it just
need.
The way you presented it was, this is how God prepared you to be. This is how life is supposed to be.
Just
step into it, and I'll show you the way. And it's not going to look how you think it's going to look. You know.
Do you, like me, Kim, have to revisit remembering these truths like every single day?
Well, I had read Valor before, but I'm a whole different person now. So as I'm going through it again, it just touches me in a whole different way.
And every day we have a choice. Every minute we have a choice. And we can choose to trust. And it brings us full circle back to the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah.
Just trust who he says he is. He is. He's a good father. He's a good king.
Yeah. This world will do everything. In my life has been every bit of testing. Are you going to trust? Are you going to keep trusting? And that's where I was talking about. We have to dig up our what's the deep questions that each one of us have that most of us don't want to talk about, but we have to get real with God at least and say, am I really trusting? Am I really...
And sometimes we do better than other days.
Sure.
Some moments we do better than other moments.
Yeah.
And I know, I can probably guarantee that this isn't the story you would write for yourself.
No, never.
As mine isn't necessarily.
And I would never want this for my children, but God's thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways.
Yeah.
But it goes back to trust and faith, and trust
does.
that, like I was going to talk about it, but I'll just real quick slide it in. But at the beginning, when I first had my son, I had my husband was away at boot camp, and I had major complications. I had to have him emergency C-section at 25 weeks. And what got me through that time, I was only 22, 23, and I held on to the promise that everything God does, he does for his glory and for our joy. And I hung on to that. And then later on, life got rocky, and I had a harder time because I couldn't see
slippery.
that as well. But now, you would think I would really break after everything. But he prepared in that 2019, like really learning how to pray. In 2020, learning your things from Valor. And even what Grant would always say, he always says, is anything we fear more than God, that's a sin.
It's our God.
It's our God. I'm worshiping all of these gods I was always worshiping God, but in my day I was letting so many thoughts in, and like you said, not taking every thought captive, not keeping my eyes on Yeshua, and those I know those sound like cliches so easily.
I know.
And we talked about how, like, we don't want to just make it, say it, some of these answers just sound so simple.
Going through the religious motions.
And we're not trying to just
But
say
there's a reality to this.
Yeah.
And you're the proof of that reality, which is why I so appreciate your story. And I know that when we were talking about that passage from George MacDonald and C.S. Lewis earlier, you said, Robin, he leaves the 99.
He always does, yes.
And you were the one. You were the one that he came for.
Right.
When he left the group. And you sensed that, didn't you?
I did. That's powerful to me. I mean, that changes everything.
It changes everything. Yeah.
And I just, yeah, if anything I could leave with viewers, that's the main thing, is that if he's not satisfied with the 99, that would never be enough for him. He wants that worship of that one is dear and precious to him, and he doesn't just,
your heart matters.
Right, yes, your heart matters. He wants our hearts. It doesn't make sense, and it's not supposed to. We live, everything's like in a dim mirror, and there's so much we don't understand in this life, but it is passing away.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope that
Yeah.
this is, like you say, like, this is not the real stuff. The real stuff is what we can't see right now, and all of this is passing away.
I know. And when you can know that, it really does give you strength for just slogging through the stuff that we have to do here and making sense of it. But when we realize that everybody's story has many pages and that he's writing it, it helps me not to judge someone by the page they happen to be on in their story.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember once I just kept saying to Grant, I want to go into a coma and wake up when this is over. We were going through something really rough and I couldn't see it having a happy ending. And he kept saying, Robin, you're going to turn the page.
Yes.
You're going to turn the page. Hang
It's
in
never, that nightmare is never forever.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So I have a feeling that people will have a question. How is your daughter doing?
She's amazing.
That's a lot for a little one to have to process and overcome. But has God provided for her to heal?
I asked her, like, what can I share, like, from her, because she's the one who was in it. Her life has been way worse than mine, and I think that just watching her has given me strength too, like, to think, that's gotten me out of my head, so I could see I'm just going to make the best life I can for these kids. But she, I asked her, like, what helps you get through the day? And she said Yeshua. She's 12 years old, and it's real. Like,
why
she doesn't share a ton. And of course, healing comes in cycles. So as she gets older, she'll have to process and heal
layers.
And
but
I trust that God is good, and He is big enough to keep her. Yeah. And we're not guaranteed safety in the body, but we are guaranteed that He will guard our soul.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. Yeah. How about you, my friend, with the issue of forgiveness? I mean, there's that whole thing. Not only self-pity destroys us, but unforgiveness will destroy us.
Yeah.
And that's a biggie for you to have to process when someone you were supposed to trust the most betrayed you the worst way ever.
That wasn't hard for me to forgive because
Why?
Because I guess I don't know how to say it, but evil does what evil does. So that part, I can forgive. I can leave that in God's hands.
Kind of like hurt people.
Yeah.
Lost people are not even able to see certain things.
Right. If that's what was in his heart, then
it doesn't dismiss the gravity of the evil, and he's paying the price. And it doesn't excuse it in any way, but it gives you the ability not to hold on to it and to wake up every day hating him.
Right. That would be bondage and just replaying all of the terrible things over and over again. But the hard thing was to forgive myself.
Yeah.
That took counseling and a journey. And
why is that always the hardest?
Pride. I think it's pride.
Okay.
I don't want to, I don't want to see myself do these things that I ended up making these mistakes. So when I was finally able to just humbly, again, like, and
surrender.
maybe we're out of practice of coming to the cross, and really, like, it should be a common practice for us to receive God's forgiveness. But yeah, when I surrendered it, when I received the gift of forgiveness, it's just, I realized I was blocking that flood of blessing and peace, and I was trying to hang on. It comes down to pride, and I don't want to live in that place of pride.
Well, I know that, and we're winding down in the last few minutes here. I'm going to give you a chance to share anything else you want to share, Kim. But I know one of the highlights of my year was the night that your sweet daughter went to experience a mikvah, because she's at that age now. She wants to pass into adulthood at her bat mitzvah time and realize that she stands before her father. And she needs to take responsibility for her own heart. And she took that very seriously.
She did, yeah.
And we went together to a place nearby where she was able to enter the pool and have a time alone with God. And we gave her that privacy. But then on the way home, it just so happened that on the radio, that song, Gratitude, was playing, and all three of us belted that song out together. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and your daughter had big tears just coming down her face, because she was really experiencing that gratitude, and it was a fresh, clean start for her. Yeah. I'm so honored to have been able to share that with you guys. It was great.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to share before we wind up today? There's so much more, but...
Yeah, we could go on and on.
I know.
Oh, I did have just one verse that I definitely wanted to share.
Okay.
Isaiah 65:17. For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. That's it.
That is it.
It will be okay. We're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And, stability and wholeness and hope is available, I think, for all of us.
Yes.
And
for everybody.
For everybody. And when someone like you can share so honestly and openly, we don't compare pain. I heard a lady recently say, sometimes life is a train wreck, and after the debris stops flying around and you kind of get your bearings and you look around, you say, okay, now what do we have to gather up here, and what do we do now with what we have?
Right.
And if
he always makes a way.
He makes a way.
Yeah.
He makes a way. Well, thank you once again. Thank you for sharing this time with us. I know you've been blessed. And Kim, before we end this conversation completely, I just want to bless you with a scripture from Romans 15, because I've come to realize that trust is the divine work that we can do. It doesn't come in our feelings, and it doesn't come easily. It's a divine work that we have to do. Yeah. And when we do it, the reward is joy and hope.
Yes.
And the joy and hope is worth the work that we do to learn how to trust. Don't you agree?
I agree.
And I've watched you do this. And we're still working together to keep moving that direction as friends and on this journey, because who knows what else is next, right? But he'll provide.
We'll be okay. Yeah.
We'll be okay. So Romans 15:13. Now may the God of hope fill you with joy and peace in believing or trusting, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kim. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.